Okay, so Steve, I think you probably heard that I'm Brooke Kent, and I run Brooke Writes It. And for 20 years, I've helped executives and professionals with their resumes and LinkedIn profiles and interview coaching. And I know that you know Darren. But Darren, for people who are listening to the recording later, would you mind introducing yourself? Because I know that your expertise spans, human resources and coaching and talent management. So could you tell, everyone a little bit about yourself?
Yeah, thank you. So I spent about 20 years in corporate America, working primarily in human resources.
Mhm.
In July of 2018, I decided to leave corporate and start my own business. When I first came out of corporate, I thought I was going to be an HR consultant and work with small, medium-sized businesses. And shockingly enough, that did not work out. And what has worked out is working as an executive career coach.
Mhm.
And so these days I get to take a lot of the learnings that I have from my corporate experience, both in corporate America, but also my personal experience. Much of what we talked about, or we will talk about mental fitness is I was not terribly mentally fit throughout my corporate career.
Right.
And so I learned a lot of hard lessons the hard way.
Mhm.
But these days I do work as an executive career coach. I work with job seekers who either know what they want to be when they grow up and just need some help finding it. The other side of that coin is folks that don't know what they want to be when they grow up. So we work towards that. And then the other population I work with are those who are gainfully employed and looking to level up. Typically what happens is, much as I've experienced in my own experience or my career,
Mhm.
is people are not always aware, or sometimes they are, of what their Achilles heels are
Right.
and what holds them back. And we coach through those things.
Thank you so much, Darren. And if people later on want to reach out to you, if they don't know you personally, what would be the best way for them to find you?
All right. So a few ways. First is I am lucky enough to be the only Darren Cancel on LinkedIn. So that might
That is
be the
rare.
easiest way, right? In my LinkedIn profile is my email address. So certainly that's the way, or a way. The other way is going to my website, which is candidcareercoaching.com.
Thank you so much, Darren. Well, let's go ahead and get started. And I'll admit anyone who's joining us late as they sign in. So let's kind of start this with two basic questions for people who aren't familiar with this topic. And those are kind of, what is mental fitness and why does it even matter? So, I'll start with an analogy and a few statistics, and then we'll turn it over to Darren. So, I like to think of physical fitness as like your body's ability to meet, and respond to the demands of your physical life. And so in the same way, mental fitness is like your mind's ability to meet and respond to the mental and emotional demands of life. And, I think mental fitness really matters probably at all times, but especially when you're job searching, because of the mental and emotional demands that you have to respond to then. And so a few studies to illustrate the point. One is that there was a Dutch study of 223 job seekers, and they found that the people who were trained in how to learn from failure and how to persevere despite rejection were 86.67% more likely to become reemployed within a year than those who weren't, which is where the title of today's webinar comes from. A second study at the University of Missouri found that the students who were graduating and who were trained to focus on positive thoughts rather than negative ones were almost 50% more likely to receive either a second interview or a job offer than the students who were focused on negative thoughts. And then the last study was from Iowa State, and they found that students who felt optimistic about their ability to control their actions and their outcomes were 20% more likely to become employed than those who weren't. So that's kind of the science, backing up what anecdotally we know to be true, which is that if you are mentally fit and able to respond to the mental and emotional demands of life, it'll be easier to job search than if you aren't. But I want to kind of turn this over to Darren for your expertise. On a lighter note, if you ever introduce yourself to people as someone who coaches other people in mental fitness, what is the funniest way that someone's ever responded when you've said that?
So interestingly enough, is many of us introduce ourselves as executive or career coaches.
Right.
And what I find is a lot of people already have a conclusion or a judgment or an assumption of what that is.
Mm-hmm.
And so one of the ways that I introduce myself is I tell people I am an emotional arborist.
Okay.
And that, like Smokey the Bear,
Okay.
I believe only you can prevent emotional forest fires.
Okay.
Right. So when I say that, either I get a laugh or someone will say, well, what does that mean? And
Uh-huh.
so that is opening the door for me to talk about my work with positive intelligence and mental fitness.
Right.
So mental fitness is very simply defined as one's ability to handle life's challenges with a
Right.
positive rather than negative mindset. And
Mm-hmm.
so there's much more to it than that. Being positive is not just a matter of putting on rose-colored glasses and accepting everything that comes at you,
Mm-hmm.
but rather it is recognizing that we are in control of certain things and not in control of other things.
Right.
And if we are mentally fit, we can try to find some positive perspective that may lead us to neutralize our negative thoughts and just
Mm-hmm.
see the world through a more positive lens,
Mm-hmm.
right? So that is it generally.
Right.
Now, I think you asked, like, what's one of the funniest ways people respond to that?
Right.
And I have to laugh. I had a client of mine who came to me through the career coaching ranks.
Uh-huh.
And during our first meeting, I asked him what he thought, and he said it's much more squishy than he thought it would be.
Okay.
And the squishiness, as he further described, was he thought we were just going to talk about resume, LinkedIn, interviewing.
Right.
And I was talking to him about how he felt about being downsized, how he
Mm-hmm.
was recognizing his own self-worth in this otherwise bad situation. And
Right.
so being mentally fit
Mm-hmm.
means knowing that I am worthy even in light of negative circumstances.
And so it sounds like that's a concrete example of how you've seen mental fitness in action in your own clients, right? In the importance of, recognizing the value of mental fitness when you are going through something as hard and challenging as a job search can be.
Very much so. Yes.
Yeah.
And happy to expand upon that if that would be helpful.
So, why don't we go on to the first step? We're going to talk about 3 steps today. And I know that this just scratches the surface of what you do in your in depth coaching with people, but so that people have some takeaways, we'll just talk about 3 steps today. And, to remember them easily, I kind of summarize them and, give it the boot, give it a go, and give yourself a hand. And Steve, if you receive the notes or outline sheet, that'll kind of be summarized there. So the first mental fitness tip I wanted to talk about was kind of give it the boot, which was controlling negative thoughts, right? And I know, Darren, you mentioned, that you see mental fitness as the ability to meet life's challenges in a positive way, right? And so this is kind of a key component of that, and I think we've all heard the Descartes saying, I think, therefore I am. And of course, Gandhi said, what a man thinks, he becomes. And I loved, when you look at how many thoughts we have each day, there was this great Canadian study where they put people into an MRI and measured, how many thoughts they would have an hour. And they said that over the course of a day, people would have like 6,200 what they called thought worms, which were complete thoughts from beginning to end, which they dubbed thought worms, which, like, once you hear that, you can't get it out of your mind. But like, then they said that 80% of those thought worms are negative, right? So almost 5,000 negative thoughts a day. And so of course they impact your job search, right? I'm sure in your clients that you've met with, Darren, you encounter a lot of negative thinking at the start, like, what if I'm a failure for getting fired? Or what if I'm underqualified or overqualified for every job I apply for? Or what if no one will ever pay me what I'm worth, right? There's a lot of negative thoughts that are really common, when we start job searching. And, of course, that's going to impact, how effective our job search is. And so, kind of the way to deal with that is to think about that British expression of give it the boot, right? You need to recognize the negative thought. And then, once you've noticed it, you can replace it with a positive one. So, Darren, I would love you to kind of talk us through that process since it's so important. I know that's kind of the meat of what you work with a lot of clients on. As you're helping them notice negative thoughts and ask themselves, is this thought accurate? Is it true? Is it helpful? And then replace it with a positive one. Can you talk to us about that process? Because I know you refer to negative thoughts as saboteurs and positive thoughts as sages. Can you tell us more about that and kind of how you put that into action with your clients?
Yeah, so I think it's first important to start off with kind of defining and creating some vernacular that's common.
Mm-hmm.
So mental fitness is a cornerstone of the overarching practice of positive intelligence.
Mm-hmm.
And so when we talk about positive intelligence, we talk about being mentally fit. And we also talk about our judge
Mm-hmm.
and our saboteurs. So this is positive intelligence vernacular.
Mm-hmm.
So the judge, if we name it that as a persona, the judge, every single one of us has a judge in our head.
Mm-hmm.
It judges ourselves, it judges others, and it judges circumstances.
Mm-hmm.
Right. So to put this specifically to some job seekers I work with who have been downsized,
Mm-hmm.
right? They first judge the situation. Well, it's the fact that it was the company and it was the industry and it was
Mm-hmm.
all these things that are not ourselves. So we're judging the circumstance.
Right.
Something else that many people do is they're judging COVID. Right. If
Mm-hmm.
not for COVID, then all these other great things would be.
Mm-hmm.
The other thing we do is we judge others. We say, well, it was that boss that I had. It was this client that complained to my boss. It was my
Mm-hmm.
coworker. It's all this external pointing at someone else.
Mm-hmm.
And then the most common way that we judge is ourselves,
Mm-hmm.
right? And, if I speak personally of myself, my judge tells me I'm not good enough. I'm not worthy.
Mm-hmm.
When things go wrong, of course it's my fault. It cannot
Mm-hmm.
be any other way. Of course it's me because
Mm-hmm.
I am not worthy. I suck. I'm all these things.
Mm-hmm.
And so to put that more in light of the job seeker is when they judge themselves
Mm-hmm.
in the job search, they start saying, well, I'm not getting called back because my resume isn't strong enough,
Mm-hmm.
or I don't have industry experience, or I don't have a degree, or fill
Mm-hmm.
in the blank. There's a number of reasons we start judging ourselves. So as you talk about giving it the boot,
Mm-hmm.
the boot that needs to be given is not necessarily just the negative thought, but
Right.
what is driving that negative thought,
Mm-hmm.
right? When I think I'm not worthy, then
Mm-hmm.
I have negative thoughts of, right, it's me, I'm not good enough, all these things. If I
Right.
can then be aware of, I am worthy,
Mm-hmm.
right? I am worthy even though I'm out of work, even though I don't have the interviews that I want, even though I'm
Right.
still job seeking. That's what we need to give the boot to. Give the
Right.
boot to the judge driving your bus.
Mm-hmm. So tell us, walk us through how that's worked, with a real life client, maybe where you help them recognize, and notice, this judge in action in their own life, and then what a difference it made when they were able to recognize that, kind of give it the boot and then replace that, with some true, accurate, and helpful thinking.
Yeah. So I can think of one client in particular who, to her own self-awareness, was a micromanager.
Okay.
And in the world of positive intelligence, what we learned is that she was a controller.
Mm-hmm.
So if you weren't doing it, I'm just going to take it. I'm going to control these situations.
Mm-hmm.
And the other thing she is what we call a stickler. So not only did she have to do it herself, but it had to be done perfectly.
Okay.
And if it wasn't done perfectly, then there was something wrong with you and there was something wrong with her.
Okay.
And so the way that showed up in her micromanagement was that, hey, you, Mr. or Mrs. Direct Report,
Mm-hmm.
are not doing it the right way, quote unquote,
Okay.
the right way. So I'm just going to take it and do it myself. And what started happening was she could never meet her own level of expectation.
Right.
Her team could never meet her level of expectation. So they just gave up.
Mm-hmm.
They were like, well, why even bother? Because
Yeah.
Bobby Sue is going to do it because I can't do it right.
And all of a sudden,
And
she's
so,
carrying 5 people's worth of work rather than her work, right? And motivating and managing the team.
correct. And what she failed to realize was she was constantly pointing the finger outwards.
Mm-hmm.
You couldn't do it right, so I have to take it. And
Mm-hmm.
because I'm taking it, now I'm so overwhelmed. And if
Right.
only I had the right people on my team and all these things. And so working through her judge, what we
Mm-hmm.
realized is that she was insulating herself from her own sense of judgment.
Right.
She didn't see that her level of expectation was so high that
Mm-hmm.
nobody, including herself, could possibly reach it.
Mm-hmm.
And so we coach through that, right? What is it like when you're constantly not meeting your own level of expectation, right?
Mm-hmm.
You are seeing a sense of self-worth by taking on everybody's work. How do
Right.
you think your team feels?
Mm-hmm.
How do you see yourself as the best manager you want to be? Who are the
Right.
managers you want to emulate? What are the things they
Mm-hmm.
do? And so what we started to do is break down this control of the judge.
Mm-hmm.
She started seeing that not everything needed to be perfect. We use something called the 80-20 rule,
Right.
which is, okay, 20%, let's say, needs to be perfect,
Right.
right? 80% does not. Meaning,
Mhm.
how I send an email to my client is my way.
Right.
It's not going to be your words. It's not going to be in your structure. So does that mean I'm doing it wrong and you're doing it right? So that's one example of her letting go of that 80%
Right.
and allowing people to explore their own way.
Mm-hmm.
And what we found is that she was a great coach. She led as being a coach. So when
Mm-hmm.
she was able to put aside her stickler and put aside her controller and show up as a leader who said,
Right.
okay, this didn't go so well. What did you learn from it? How
Mm-hmm.
can I help you? Here are some suggestions of what I did. What did she start to see was that her team was responding to her better.
Mm-hmm.
She was feeling significantly less anxious,
Right.
and she was getting stronger scores on engagement surveys.
Mm-hmm. Can you walk us through, Darren? I know a really common thought that I run into with many clients that I deal with who are obviously, job searching is that feeling that, I'm a failure, because I was let go. And what if I never find another job? Can you walk us through, how you would go about giving the boot, to that judge and those negative thoughts, and replacing it with thoughts that are more positive, true, accurate, and helpful, because that is such a common thought that I think people encounter when they're job searching.
Yeah. So these are actionable things. The first is to think through accomplishments,
Mhm.
right? That's number one. And you know as well as I do, Brooke, when you're writing a resume,
Right.
today's way of writing a resume is not a regurgitation of job description.
No.
It is a listing of accomplishments. So
Right.
start there. Start with what you accomplished.
Mhm.
That is a positive thought.
Right.
Typically, these accomplishments are things that we're proud of.
Right.
And things that we're proud of are things we're typically good at.
Mhm.
And when we're good at something, we're in our ease and flow. And this
Right.
is really calling upon our strength.
Mhm.
So that's one step, is to think about accomplishment.
Mhm.
Two is speak to others. And what I mean by this is seek out people you trust.
Right.
If it's people in the workforce, especially for a job seeker, I think that's a great thing. Former
Mhm.
colleagues, peers, direct reports, seniors, whoever, and
Right.
ask them questions about you.
Mhm.
So in essence, be curious and ask them, hey, what did you respect about me?
Right.
Where did I show up strongest at work? Where
Mhm.
do I need some help?
Right.
Right? The only failure, if anything, is that we fail to be the most successful in that job.
Right.
Right? Because we were let go. Now, sometimes we're let go for circumstances outside of our doing. Sometimes
Mhm.
it's very much in our doing. Doesn't matter which side of the coin we fall on there. Nonetheless, is we are valued. You are valued.
Right.
And so if you ask others for feedback about you, you are
Mhm.
going to hear great things in somebody else's words.
Right.
My one tip is, sorry, real quick,
Mhm.
if anybody takes me up on this and reaches out to folks and asks for feedback,
Right.
when you get it, just say thank you.
Thank you.
Do,
Instead
do
of
not
arguing about the
argue,
feedback.
do not debate, do not defend. Feedback is a gift. Say thank you. That's
Right.
it.
I
Yeah.
think that is such great advice, Darren. And that really is the number one thing that I work with my clients on when I'm helping them on the resume and the LinkedIn profile side is that you need to shift your focus on from duties and responsibilities of what you were responsible for to what are your actual results and accomplishments in those positions. Because, purely from a getting re-employed and rehired point of view, that's what hiring managers and recruiters want to see in order to connect the dots from, Steve did XYZ at his last position. I trust that he can do this in the new position, and it is, and I think, like you said, Darren, the positive effect of that is also when we tell ourselves those things that are true, accurate, and helpful about these are the things I got done in my last position, it helps replace that false thought of, I'm a failure because I was let go. Because we can say, no, the evidence to the contrary is these things, that I was able to do.
Correct. Very much so.
Darren, any thoughts, other thoughts or advice, as far as, if people did one thing to change their mindset around the way that they talk to themselves, is there one final piece of advice that you wanted to share before we move on to the next step that we're going to talk about?
The biggest thing that I work with my clients on is self-awareness.
Mm-hmm.
And I know this is a very broad topic, and I don't know it's going to be so pinpointed as you were asking, but
Right.
where I'm going with this is those folks who are most self-aware
Mm-hmm.
of physiological response and or thoughts,
Right.
i.e., I know for me, when I'm anxious, I feel it in my chest. When I'm angry, I grip my teeth and my jaw starts to hurt.
Right.
And so where I'm going with this is when I am self-aware and or you, the general you or whoever's listening is self-aware, and you
Mm-hmm.
recognize I'm clenching my jaw,
Right.
ask yourself why.
Right.
What is making me so angry right now that I'm just clenching my jaw?
Right.
What's making me anxious, right? For the job seeker, a lot of times it's resistance.
Mhm.
It's resistance to reaching out to someone.
Mhm.
It's resistance to taking the extra step. It's the resistance to putting yourself out there in a way in which, yes, you might get rejected,
Mhm.
but you won't get rejected. You won't even get accepted or rejected unless you put yourself out there, which is,
Right.
the age old cliche, right?
Right.
So my point being is that be aware of you, understand your triggers,
Mhm.
understand your emotional connection to what's going on,
Mhm.
be mindful of it, right?
Right.
If you are resistant to something, why? What is causing you the resistance? Is it fear? A lot of times it's fear, right? I'm
Mhm.
afraid of putting myself out there. I
Mhm.
don't want to get rejected,
Right.
right? If you are aware of it, what I say is push yourself to the beginning of discomfort,
Mhm.
right? When you're at the line of discomfort, go one step further and do it,
Right.
right? It's like anything we do for the first time, it is so scary
Right.
when it's something scary, like public speaking or whatever it might be.
Yeah.
When you do it the first time, you're done. You've already gotten over those fears. So
Yeah.
that's the edge of discomfort, in my opinion.
I think that is such great advice because I think, like you said, Darren, that mindfulness and being able to drag these subconscious feelings out to the light and say, why am I clenching my chest? Why do I feel this tightness in my chest? Can help us gain clarity on what are we actually scared of in this situation. So then once we can name that fear, then we can address it and it's not so scary anymore. So.
Agreed.
Yeah. So let's talk about our next step, which I called giving it a go. And so following on with your talk, about, being snowboarders, I kind of, open this with the analogy of, this mental fitness step I called giving it a go, which was around adopting a growth mindset. And as I told Darren, I know how to ski, but 2 winters ago, I decided to learn how to snowboard with my 14-year-old daughter. And for all of us who've seen snowboarders on the bunny hill, you can imagine how that went at the start, some spectacular falls. And, it's a very humbling experience, right? When you're trying to learn how to snowboard. But, I was totally okay with that because I did not expect myself to be Shaun White on the first run down the bunny hill, right? Every time I had a spectacular fall, I could pick myself up and say, it's okay, I'm learning, I'm going to pick myself back up and give it a go. And the same thing, I think we need to tell ourselves in all areas of life, but especially when we're job searching, because certainly job searching is harder, more difficult, more stressful than learning how to snowboard on the bunny hill. But how many of us are so much harder on ourselves when we fall or mess up when we're job searching than we would be if we're learning how to snowboard and we take a spectacular fall, right, on the bunny hill. And so kind of that attitude of being willing to give it a go, I think is really powerful and helpful when we're job searching. And certainly, as you would expect, the studies bear that out, when they've studied, older people who are going back into the workforce, people who were trained to adopt a growth mindset are like 40% more likely to become reemployed than those who weren't. And so, I think besides just acknowledging that we need to have a growth mindset, we should talk about why. Maybe because of COVID, you're having to pivot to a whole new industry and apply your old skills, in a whole new area. Or maybe you're having to learn new skills, a new program, a new programming language, a new technique, whatever we're doing in our lives, we're always learning, growing, and changing. And so I think being willing to be gentle on ourselves and have that I'll give it a go kind of attitude is really helpful. So Darren, I would love to turn it over to you kind of for your thoughts on the fixed mindset versus a growth mindset. Why do you think that's important, in job searching? And could you give us some examples, from your own life or a client's life of when you recognize that, you or they kind of had that fixed mindset and then what a difference it made kind of transitioning to a growth mindset?
Yeah. So fixed mindset to me equals the judge,
Hmm.
right? Fixed mindset says, I've done it before, and the way I'm doing it is the only way to do it.
Hmm.
Or it's not even worth trying because I have so much evidence to prove that it doesn't work,
Right.
or whatever it is. So fixed mindset to me is being stuck in the mud or trying to run in mud.
Hmm.
Growth mindset to me is simply being open. It's
Okay.
it's recognizing that there are other ways that things can get done,
Hmm.
and all I've got to do is be open to it.
Right.
Now, personally, it took me a long time to recognize that. When I was younger, I knew everything. You couldn't tell me a thing. And the only person that was able to teach me any lessons was my father, and he passed away when I was 21 years old. So I went through a lot of my early years thinking that no one could teach me anything because I knew everything.
Right.
And it hurt. It hurt me. It hurt me a lot, especially in the workplace. So as it relates to the job seeker, the give it a go, give it a try, the growth mindset is related to trying something that, again, stretches you into a little bit of discomfort.
Right.
Being open that if you work with a coach, if you read articles online, if you talk to your friends and family, if they share something with you that worked for them that's not already in your toolbox, so to speak, the idea of giving it a go is that there is merit in everything we do.
Right.
There's merit in everything we do, because if it doesn't work and it doesn't suit us, we now have the knowledge to know I'm not doing that again.
Right.
Like putting your hand on a hot stove, right? I don't need to put my hand on a hot stove anymore to know it's going to burn me.
Right.
There's knowledge there, right? So there's experience. Now, granted, in that story I just told you, if someone would have told me it's hot and I'm going to burn myself, I probably wouldn't have listened to them. I'd touch it anyway. So the give it a go is try something new. Stretch your comfortability. Think about other ways that you can approach your job search.
Right.
The other thing that I would say in this realm is our brain. I'm not a neuroscientist, so if somebody calls me out on this, I'll have to kind of bow out. But from what I've read is the brain gets overwhelmed easy.
Right.
If we think about start to finish and the totality of whatever that may be, our brains get overwhelmed. If we think about steps from start to step 1, 2, and so on, we can then tackle step 1.
Right.
So what I often tell my clients is, what is one step? What is one thing that you can do to move the ball forward that is different than you're doing today? That's it, just one step. And after we take that step, we have the luxury of stopping and saying, okay, did it work? Did it not work? What did I learn from it? Am I open to trying this again? If I try it again, do I modify it? If I think it's good and it didn't work, do I try it exactly the same? Doesn't matter what it is, right? That to me is growth mindset. It is openness to exploration. It is being curious.
Right. And it, like what you described, is totally like A/B testing in action, right? I don't have anything to lose just by trying, it, and then I'll compare A versus B. Was it, did it have some good results? Did it not? Do I want to tweak it? And so we're not committing ourselves to the fact that this is how I'm going to approach my job search, for the next 5 months, but I'm just trying this one thing and seeing how it works out.
Correct.
So, I know that you've worked on the other side of the table as far as the hiring manager, and recruiter side. Can you share with us an example of when you were on that side of the table? What really told you if a client kind of had that fixed mindset versus the growth mindset? Did you look for that? Is that something you wanted to hire for because you knew that those people, would also have that approach in their work lives? Can you tell us what that looked like from the other side of the table?
Yeah. So many nuggets there for sure, especially for the job seeker. The first is, as a job seeker, as an interviewee, there is a interviewing concept strategy called behavioral interviewing, which is tell me a time when blah, blah, blah. When you are asked, tell me a time when, the interviewer is looking for a specific example.
Right.
They are not looking for you to generally talk about what you do. They want to know a time when you did it. So that's the first thing, is be specific. 2 is, when I used to interview, I would always ask something on the negative.
Right.
And it's getting into a time where you failed, a time where you didn't meet your expectations, the dreaded what's your weakness question.
Right.
However somebody words that question, what they're looking for, or at least what I was looking for, is one, your self-awareness. Right. What do you know about yourself in that negative question?
Right.
And 2 is, what do you do to overcome it?
Right.
Right. For instance, I am not a very good administrator. I don't have, great attention to detail. I don't take great notes. I don't update the system. Yet, I know this about myself. And the way that I overcome that is I have calendar invites and reminders on there. I use this email or this Outlook system called Take Your Life Back, which uses tasks.
Right.
So that is how I overcome my weakness of being a poor administrator.
Right.
And so as an interviewee, as the candidate, as the job seeker, be very aware of what are your shortcomings and what do you do to overcome them.
And I guess what I would add on to that, Darren, is, when I'm coaching people, that I work with on their resume and LinkedIn profiles, and then I'm coaching them to get ready for an interview, I tell them people love to think in stories, right? So use this question as an opportunity to tell a story. And just like we learned in high school, English, a story, it starts with a conflict, right? Or a problem that needs to be solved. And then this is your opportunity to tell them, yes, I lost that client account because I did XYZ. I didn't meet expectations, or, I dropped the ball on this or whatever. But then you get to be the hero of the story because you can talk about how you resolved it and how you grew, and you're taking them to that conclusion of the story where you're the hero of the story because you learned and you grew from that experience, right?
Very much so. And there's three acronyms. There's one that I like best, which is STAR, like stars in the sky.
Mm-hmm.
There is CAR, like we drive our car, or there's PAR, like on the golf course.
Right.
And all three of them, the A and the R is an action and results.
Right.
And I'll use STAR, right? It's situation, task, action, results.
Mm-hmm.
So in an interview, when you're asked, tell me a time when, if you go through that framework, right? The situation was I was working at this company and, we were way over budget on this project and whatever it was. I was tasked with getting the project back on task to reduce costs and to make sure we're meeting timeline. The action I took is the following, and here's what the result was.
Right.
So having a framework to answer interview questions is key. The other thing you said, Brooke, that I'll echo as well is interview prep.
Mm-hmm.
Right? A lot of people I speak with think interview prep means knowing the company I'm interviewing with, having questions about their environment, knowing the job. And yes, that is part of interview prep.
Mm-hmm.
Yet what is often overlooked is the personal preparation.
Right.
And what I always advise is that you need to have 5 stories at the ready, at least 5, right? It's your favorite project, it's a time you failed, it's a difficult person you worked with, and whatever else you choose again. And we usually, when I'm coaching folks, I go through a number of behavioral interviewing questions and say, okay, what story do you have to answer any one of these? Now, typically what happens is in those 5 stories is you can answer a plethora of behavioral interview questions.
Right.
So you don't need to have a story for every question. You just need to have 5 stories.
Right.
And then what happens is when you're prepared,
in the vice presidential debates, you don't necessarily need to answer the question that was asked, right? You kind of the response you're looking for.
Yes. When you know those 5 stories, right, there's inflection in your voice. You could be more cognizant of how you're showing up. Are you excited? Are you not? Whatever it may be. The other thing too is when you know your stories, you are just trying to recall which story am I going to tell and what are the important details.
Right.
If you are unprepared, then what you're trying to do is remember the entire story from however long ago, and then you trip over your words. Right? Oh, wait, there's this detail. Oh yeah, I forgot this other detail. And then that's how you quickly derail. So yeah, I love your point about the story. That's huge.
Yeah. If you had just one piece of advice for people around their mindset, kind of around growth in this area, what one piece of advice would you share? If you were, Darren Canthal is writing the one, postcard to the world about mindset, what one piece of advice would be on it?
The one thing I always say to my clients is you are great because you are you. And what we need to do is highlight your greatness. And so when we talk about growth mindset, it is recognizing that you are truly great. There are people that love you. There are people that want to work with you. And the trick is in an interview to convey that.
Right.
When the judge is driving your bus, you are focused on negative. When you're speaking about your greatness, that's a positive thing to focus on.
Yeah. And I think, Darren, like you said, when you approach life and interviews and your job search from that mindset, that place of strength of, I am great because, I am me, and people love me and care about me, then we also have that place of security to be willing to try, things that are a little bit outside our comfort zone, whether it's, Aunt Sue's saying, what really helped me when I was job searching was, calling, friends of friends, people that you don't really know, but that are that 1 or 2 step connection in your network, and then being willing to say, well, what's the harm in taking Aunt Sally's advice and just trying that for a week and seeing how it goes?
Yes.
So let's talk about kind of the last step in it, which was give yourself a hand, which is that sense of self-efficacy. And Steve and others who, watch this later, there's a quiz on the sense of self-efficacy that I'll link up, for this recording. But basically, self-efficacy is that internal belief that you have the ability to meet, to overcome, and to succeed at the challenges of your life. So someone with a high sense of self-efficacy would kind of agree with statements like, when I face difficult tasks, I believe that I can accomplish them. Or in general, I think that I can achieve outcomes that matter to me. Or even when things are tough, I can perform quite well. And it's obvious why that would benefit your job search, because if you have a high sense of self-efficacy, then people who have that high sense of self-efficacy are 15% more likely to be higher than people without, right? Because they believe that they can succeed at the challenges of life. So Darren, I would love your thoughts kind of on this topic as a whole, that sense, that internal belief that we have in whether or not we can succeed at the challenges of life. Tell us about how you've seen this in action in the job searches, either of yourself personally or of clients you've worked with. How did this come into play, this sense of self-efficacy?
Yeah. All right. So the first thing I want to note is that we all have bad days,
Right.
Whether it's a singular bad day or if it's a grouping of bad days.
Mm-hmm.
So keep that in mind as we're talking about being mentally fit and being positive. Is there's also acknowledgement that we have bad days.
Right.
The trick is, how quickly do you recover and then pick yourself back up?
Mm-hmm.
And I think this gets into the self-efficacy and for those that are mentally fit.
Right.
So one of the things that I have found to be really beneficial when working with folks on being more self-efficacy or whatever, being more of a, yes, you know what I'm saying, is one, to think about small victories, right? I'm not even kidding. I've worked with some people who were so in the dumps that a victory was getting out of bed.
Right.
A victory was taking a shower and changing their clothes. And when they focused on that victory,
right,
even though it seemed so ridiculous
right,
to some, it was so big for them. And once they started building on these victories, they were able to say, oh, wow, look at all this stuff I accomplished.
right.
Now, to make it maybe more mainstream, if you will, is I like to celebrate things with my clients when they are in a place where they need some help, right? So what are we celebrating? We're celebrating that they crossed things off their list, that they moved into discomfort. They networked with 5 people this past week.
Right.
They had an interview, whatever it might be. So the point is to celebrate the things that are important. We accomplish so many things, big and small, throughout a day, week, month, year, etc. So what are they? These things that we celebrate typically align with our greatness.
Right.
Our greatness typically aligns with what we're good at. When we do things we're good at, we're usually pretty happy.
Right.
When we're happy, we're usually more joyful, right?
Yeah.
People that I'm around don't like me when I am angry, right? It's not very fun.
Yeah.
So when I'm in my flow and I'm having fun and I'm compassionate to myself and compassionate to you, and we find common middle grounds, when we face conflict resolution with positivity in the sense of, hey, before this blows up, let's talk through. I apologize for my actions. Here's what I was experiencing, right? The same thing could happen in our brain, right? I mean, I don't know about you, but I've got a lot of voices going back and forth, right? And sometimes when I'm talking to myself, I'm like, hey, man, that was pretty bad what you just did. And the other side is like, yeah, it was. And you know what? I'm going to give myself grace. And I'm going to recognize that this is a blip. This is a mistake. If this is a pattern of mine, why is it a pattern? What do I want to do about this pattern? Right. So I try to champion myself in my brain. If I need support, I reach out to someone and say, hey, I need some support. Can you help me, please? I'm in the dumps.
Yeah.
But a little bit long-winded to say, it's really important to celebrate any and all victories when you need them. If you're pretty even-keeled, then maybe the things you celebrate are a little bit grander scale. But we all achieve great things every single day.
Right. And
Celebrate
I
them.
guess going along with what you said, Darren, and this, sense of, giving yourself a hand, and building that sense, of self-efficacy that you can meet and succeed at these challenges is, I know when I work with clients, I encourage them to approach their job search from a sense of process goals rather than outcome goals, right? Because we don't have control over when we get hired, how long that takes, how many interviews we have to go on, to reach that outcome. But what we do have control over is the process. Maybe you mentally commit to yourself, to use your example, Darren, that I'm going to network with 5 people each day, whether that's by phone, by email, by reaching out on LinkedIn. And every week I'm going to research, 3 companies that I want to apply at. We have control over process goals and we don't have control over the outcome. So like Darren said, celebrate when you're achieving those process goals. If you said it was important to your job search to, spend maybe 30 minutes talking to 3 people, a day about your job search, then celebrate and give yourself a high five, when you achieve that. Because we don't have, I think so many of us get hung up on the fact that, well, I still don't have a job and I haven't been offered a job yet. And we're not, like you said, taking the time to celebrate that we are achieving these steps in our process that are ultimately, going to result in the desired result.
Yeah. And I think the other thing that's important to note here is share the celebration with others.
Yes.
It may seem silly, but the 5th person that you network with that meets your goal, tell them, hey, I had a goal to speak with 5 people today or this week, and you're my 5th. Thank you for helping me meet my goal.
Well, because people love celebrating with you, right? Letting them be part of that joy and celebration gives others a good feeling, right? And it puts that good feeling out into the world, which I think ultimately, results in positive results because, when we're fun and joyful to be around, then other people want to be around us. I
Great.
will piggyback on to what you said, Darren. Also tell your loved ones, whether you're married or have kids or, it's your mom who's calling every day to check on your job search, share with them that celebration of meeting those process goals, because not only will it make you happy to share it, it will relieve the sense of stress that they're feeling, because then it gives them a positive window into what you're doing, on this. And especially if it's a spouse or your kids, they can certainly pick up on the fact that this is a hard and stressful thing that we're going through. And so by celebrating with them that we're meeting these process goals, I think it makes it a better process, for everyone to be going through.
Yeah. I do want to mention something is I am an extrovert. So a lot of the things I talk about are through my extroversion eyes. I do know for the introvert, some of the things we're talking about is not so easy.
Right.
And the idea of celebrating with others doesn't come natural and can sometimes be a deterrent or makes them really uncomfortable.
Mm-hmm.
And so when I work with some of my introverted clients, we typically brainstorm what it means to celebrate for them, right? Some introverts celebrate by journaling, and that is a way for them to get it out, and they literally celebrate by that journaling. Some have told me they speak to their animals, and just vocalizing it to something they feel such a strong connection with, their dog or their cat or their fish or whatever, is a way for them to celebrate.
Without them having the emotional burden of sharing it with a person,
Of
right?
course. Yes. And others do have a very small, I shouldn't say very small, that's not a fair thing to say, but have a smaller but tighter knit group of friends and family that they entrust.
Mm-hmm.
And what we usually talk about is who in that tight knit circle are you comfortable sharing in these things?
Right.
Maybe mom is really great for the emotional connection and dad is really great at the technical, and my friend Bobby Sue is great for this other thing. So it's almost knowing who is best to connect with. And then on any given day, time, whatever it is, who to reach out to for that celebration.
Right. I guess bottom line is you want this to fill your tank and build you up as you're going through your job search, because it can certainly be draining. So you need to know what fills your tank. And maybe, Darren, like you said, for an introvert, it might be saying, family, I achieved my networking goal. I'm going to lock myself in the bathroom and take a bubble bath and no one comes on the door. Maybe that's what you fill your tank. Or maybe, if you're more extroverted, it is putting it out there, to your 20 members of your friend group that, hey, I did this, and getting a big group text going or whatever. So,
yeah. Yes.
Okay. So before we wrap up, Darren, as we kind of think about our topic as a whole of being mentally fit, thinking about and noticing those negative thoughts and that judging behavior, being willing to give it a go, and, being willing to celebrate, those victories that we have in our process so that we can kind of pat ourselves on the back, is there kind of final advice or thoughts, that you would like to leave us with as we kind of think about this topic as a whole as it relates to job searching?
Yes, of course, many, I'm sure. The first that comes up to me is that I have plenty of clients that I work with that feel as though they're on an island by themselves.
Mm-hmm.
And what happens when they're on that island is, I had a client that used to call it the shame spiral.
Mm-hmm.
So she would start spiraling, and then that shame would just bring her farther down.
Mm-hmm.
And what she said to me once was, man, if I only had an opportunity to speak to you for 5 minutes, I could have stopped that spiral. And then my question was, well, why didn't you reach out? So any of my clients know that I say this all the time is, if I could be a resource in between our meetings, don't hesitate to reach out.
Mm-hmm.
And so I share that because what usually happens is, if we get tripped up, if we hit a roadblock, if something is stopping us from progress,
Mm-hmm.
and we sit and spin, then our judge, our closed mindset, whatever word you like best, starts spiraling.
Mm-hmm.
And sometimes all it takes is just sharing with someone else. Hey, I encountered this. Can you help me?
Right.
So in wrap up, one of the things I say is, know those people, whether it's your coach, your friend, whoever it is. Reach out to them instead of spinning and say, I need help with this thing real quick. Can you do me a favor? Can you help me?
Mm-hmm.
That's the first thing.
Mm-hmm.
2 is,
can I
along
just
these lines.
Karen?
Yeah,
And I
please.
a lot of times by just the act of articulating whatever the problem is, then the solution becomes clear in our own mind, because just having to put into words whatever the issue is, then we're like, oh yeah, and it's clear that what I need to do is this thing to get over that.
Yeah. Agreed. That's a good point. Very much so. Yep.
Okay, go on. Sorry for interrupting.
No, I love it. Please. Kind of along these lines is, don't underestimate the power of your network.
Mm-hmm.
Right? Now, I'll go on the soapbox for a quick second here. Is a lot of people think of network as networking, and networking typically brings up the vision of pre-COVID, of course. Now maybe it's more virtual, but going to the networking event, getting 2 drink tickets, eating some crappy hors d'oeuvres, handing out business cards, et cetera, et cetera.
Right.
Now, I'm extrovert. I don't like that environment, and I sure as heck know that introverts do not like that at all. So where I'm going with this, to bring it back around, is our network, to me, are the personal and professional contacts that we have. It's the people we trust. It's the people we can reach out to and say, I need help.
Mm-hmm.
So don't forget the power of our networks, not only to help build us up, to give us feedback, to give us advice, to coach us, but also to help us find jobs, to make introductions to people that might be able to help us, to give us some guidance. I'm stuck. I need help. Whatever it might be, is do not underestimate the power of network.
Mm-hmm.
And then the third thing I would say is, action begets action.
Mm-hmm.
Right? So when you are stuck, take some sort of action.
Mm-hmm.
The action could simply be walking away from your computer and doing a lap around your house.
Right.
Action could be taking the dog for a walk. Action could be picking up the phone. Action could be playing a game. It could be whatever it is.
Mm-hmm.
But sometimes simply shifting our minds to something else is the action we need, whether it's perceivably productive or not. Is that simple shift, that simple action can beget more action. So take some action.
Yeah. And I guess I will second, what you said, Darren, along the lines of taking action and recognizing the power of people who actually know you. I know that in the 20 years I've worked with clients on, their resumes and LinkedIn profiles, almost always, where that lead on a potential job that ends up working out comes from is not from your very inner circle, but it's kind of from the friends of your friends, right? And so being willing, to stretch your network out to, who's the friend of a friend, who might know something, because if the job opportunity was known to your inner circle, then most likely you already know about it, right? So the ones that you don't know about are kind of the ones that are as the friend of the friend, or the friend of your college roommate, or, whatever. And so, you need to use your personal circle that knows you and respects you to help make those connections to the friends of friends, and then, like Darren said, being willing to take just small actions that are just one step beyond your comfort zone. Because I think all of us feel uncomfortable and hesitant, to pick up the phone or send a message to someone we don't intimately know, but just by trying that one thing and then celebrating that small victory, I think is how we push the job search forward.
Yeah. You remind me of one thing I want to share is kind of a networking best practice.
Right.
Is a lot of people I speak to when they are in the job search, reach out to people and say, who do you know is hiring? How can you help me find a new job? Right. And a lot of us don't know who is hiring. The tip that I would provide is asking somebody who in your network do you think would be worthwhile to introduce me to?
Right.
Right. So most of us know people, and most of us are typically willing to make an introduction.
Right.
And it's those introductions, to your point, Brooke, that is the friends of the friends that go from our tight knit circle to the outer to the tertiary. And so that's the tip, is asking, who can you introduce me to?
Right. And I think, Darren, that's such a great way to frame it, because you're not giving them a yes, no question where they just say, no, I don't know anyone who's hiring. You're giving them a small question where you say, can you think of 2 or 3 people you can introduce me to? And then most people are like, yes, here's 2 or 3 names, and that way you're getting something that's actionable for you. And you're not just giving them a yes or no question, that's not super helpful for either one of you.
Yes.
Yeah. Steve, do you have any final questions before we wrap up? And of course, I'll send out this recording to everyone who wasn't able to join us live, but any final questions that are on your mind before we wrap this up?
None right at hand, but certainly very helpful. Some good thoughts. Really appreciate the structure you guys have provided, and the tips, especially the wrap up here with networking. I think that's key, is always trying to find a lead from any conversation, right? Is there's either follow up with people or topics or how to further that path of finding that job. So appreciate all the comments today. It's real thoughtful.
Absolutely. Our pleasure, Steve. And Darren, thank you again so much for joining us today. I think that your advice and wisdom and insights and experience were so helpful, and I really appreciate you taking the time to be here today.
Thank you, Brooke. I appreciate it. It was nice to be here.
Absolutely. Well, for everyone, I will send out a link to this recording now that we're done. And of course, if you have any questions, please feel free to reach out to Darren at Candid Career Coaching, .com, or you can reach me, Brooke Kent, at brookewrightsit.com. And once again, we thank you so much for joining us. And if you're interested, next month, my webinar will be with an acting coach on how to overcome and deal with rejection, which again is a staple of the job search. So if you know anyone who's interested, feel free to send them my way.
Thank you.
Well, thank you so much to everyone. It's been a pleasure to have you join us.
Thanks so much, Brooke. Thanks, Darren.